Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Nashville is the city of music where everybody gets their start at a honky tonk, a bar, and the Grand Ole Opry Theater. But also, it's where we get to see some racing action at Nashville Super Speedway. And last night on a Sunday night race, a man who got his first career pole this weekend silenced the doubters and the haters and got his first win of the year. Let's get into all that went down in the city of music. Number 1, Ross Chastain, the Melon Man, scores his first win of the season by winning last night's Ally 400 at Nashville Super Speedway, holding off Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson for the victory. What a really good weekend for Ross Chastain. A good, clean weekend, shall we say. He hadn't had many of them this year. Got his first career pole on Saturday and the first pole for the team for Trackhouse Racing. And he took that pole and ran up at the front of the race the entire night. Was strong at the beginning, fell back, lost the lead towards the end of stage 1 to Tyler Reddick, but was able to stay in the top 5 for the majority of the night. And as the track cooled down, and especially on long runs, that one car was a rocket ship. And he could just run down anybody that was in front of him, and he was able to pass the Toyotas late in the middle of the final stage and got the better of them on pit road. Even though there were times where he was running around lap traffic, including heavy lap traffic, he had to try to negotiate and find his way through some of those cars that were in front of him. And at one moment where he was down the backstretch with about under 20 laps to go, he takes it 3 wide, splitting the middle between the lap cars of Eric Almirola and J.J. Yaley to continue to hold the lead while Martin Truex Jr. was continuing to hound him from behind. But Chastain was not going to be denied, and he was able to pull away and get that first win of the season for a year that's been controversial, shall we say. We all know how good and how talented Ross Chastain is in the sport. Ever since he came to the Cup Series driving for Chip Ganassi Racing in 2021, and then, of course, joining Trackhouse last year. It was a big year for the team where he got them their first 2 wins at COTA and Talladega, and then went on to make the Championship 4 after the amazing Hail Melon move at Martinsville, riding the wall in the last lap to get those spots he needed to make the Championship 4 and knock out Denny Hamlin. This year, it's been good at the beginning with some really solid runs, but recently he's kind of gone into a little bit of a downfall. And most of that has been to some of the run-ins that he's had on the racetrack. It seems like every race this year, at the beginning of the year, there was a controversial moment that involved the one car of Chastain and left someone upset at him. It kind of really kicked itself into full gear at Kansas when he was racing middle of the pack with Noah Gragson for position off of 4. Chastain's car kind of pushed up the track a little bit and squeezed Gragson into the wall. Gragson was not happy, came down, retaliated, but ultimately Gragson was the one that was on the bad end of that incident. And post-race, Gragson confronted Chastain and he started to grab him saying, "You idiot," and Chastain told him to stop. And when he didn't stop, Chastain threw a punch. Justin Marks doesn't really like that when his drivers throw punches or get involved in major situations that could result in massive controversy and massive points penalties. But they split him up. And then the following race weekend, it didn't go well for the one team as he was involved in a late race restart incident with the 5-car Kyle Larson battling for the lead. It took both of them out. And Mr. Hendrick was not pleased with the way Chastain was racing his driver at that time and called him out for it. And Chastain, at that time, I think, took a step back from his over-aggressive racing and kind of slowed down, but may have slowed down a little too much. The 2 races after that, the Coke 600 and Gateway, not really good results for the one team. They were struggling. I'm like, what's going on? This is not the one team I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing them running in the top 5, top 10, and competing for wins on a consistent basis. Those weeks were not really good to them. But then the previous race weekend that we had, before we had the off weekend, he had a nice top 10 finish with a 10th place at Sonoma, getting a little bit of confidence back on his side. And it carried over to them coming off the off weekend with the pole that they had on Saturday and winning last night's race. And this officially lost him to the playoffs, the 11th different winner of the season. We've got 5 spots remaining, and time's ticking for some of those guys to try to win races. But Chastain, with the way he's in on points, and he still has a chance to win the regular season title by the time we get to Daytona. He's got to beat some of those guys in front of him, but the win last night helped him get further to that number 1 spot in the regular season standings, and more importantly, lock him into the playoffs. So a big congrats to Ross Chastain and the one team at a great performance last night, and we got to see the watermelon smash post-race. Whether you like him or not, you cannot deny that him smashing a watermelon when he wins is a fun celebration. Number 2, Toyota, strong all race, but falter yet again. Last year we saw how good Toyota was when it was bright outside. They were one of the best teams out there. Nobody could have anything for the Toyotas. But then we had that weather delay, and then the night came along, and some other guys surfaced at the front, and they weren't able to win the race, even though Kurt Busch finished second in the race to Chase Elliott. This year, once again, Toyota was very, very strong. Let's start off with Martin Truex Jr., the man who finished runner-up to Ross Chastain. Great race car for the majority of the race last night. Ran up in the top 5, was battling for the lead. It looked like at times he had the car to beat. He just had a really good short-run car. When it came to long runs, especially when the track cooled down and the sun went down, it was a good race car, but it wasn't a dominant race car like other guys had. But nonetheless, Truex was able to come away with a good second place finish. Good momentum for the team after winning a couple weekends ago at Sonoma. Then we have Denny Hamlin, who finished third in the race. And quite frankly, he said even though he was dominant in the latter half of the final part of the race, from the middle of stage 2 to the beginning of stage 3, he said, I deserve to finish third behind the 2 best cars that race, which were the 1 and the 19th. So, I mean, Hamlin at the beginning was decent, and then stage 2, as the sun was continuing to go down, he made some adjustments to the car, and they got themselves the lead, especially when we had a little bit of an incident during green flag pit stops, which I'm about to talk about in a second. But Hamlin still had a good race car the entire race. After getting that lead, he frankly never left the top 5 for the majority of the night. It looked like he was going to lose third place in the last lap of the race, but something happened behind him, but he was able to come away with a good third place finish. As for the other driver I'm about to talk about, which is a driver that missed out on an opportunity due to a mistake on pit road early in the race, that would be Tyler Reddick, a man who had a okay run going at Sonoma until he had a flat tire and then went around the other way and got penalized for it. That was like one of the big talking points other than Truex's dominating victory. This race, Reddick at the beginning, like Chastain, Truex, and Hamlin and others, he was a good race car. He had the speed. He took the lead from the 1 car after the 1 was getting held behind from some lap traffic, and Reddick proceeded to win stage 1. Then the beginning of stage 2, they lost some spots in the pit stops when everyone pitted, but they were able to get back inside the top 5, and they looked like they had the speed on their car. But when we had green flag pit stops in the middle of stage 2, after Reddick left pit road, his car was shaking a little back and forth coming off of turn 4 and was getting ready to pit because he had a loose right rear wheel, but the car spun around in the pack, and you saw when he was spinning in slow motion, the hubcap for the right rear came off. But the wheel still stayed on. He backed the car into pit road, then he proceeded to lose the wheel, brought out the caution, and unfortunately, it cost Tyler Reddick a chance for the victory because he had a good race car. But it seems like that pit road and pit mistakes from the pit crew has been their Achilles heel this year to win multiple races. And of course, the spin when it happened, he did make a commitment line violation by running over the missing the line, I think, when he was coming down pit road, spinning back and forth. And ultimately cost him 2 laps. He finished in the 30th spot, was never able to become a factor for the rest of that race. He had a good race car, but unfortunately that right wheel incident, that hurt him and took him out of contention. But once again, Toyota's so good at Nashville, but not able to capitalize when it mattered the most. Number 3, Hendrick Motorsports, with 3 of their drivers in the top 6 with solid runs. Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and William Barn all came away with solid runs last night. Let's talk about the man who won last year's race and finished 4th, Chase Elliott, coming into a weekend where the final 10 races are begun, and we obviously now have 9 races to go in the regular season before the playoffs start. He's in a must-win situation, but could still point his way in. Had a good race car last night, starting from 14th and worked his way inside the top 10 and hovered around 6th place for the majority of stage 1. Then stage 2, stayed within the top 10, but kind of lost a couple spots on pit stops, and then some guys like him were trapped by that caution for the Reddick car, but they took the wave around and got their laps back, and pretty much hung inside the top 10 for all of stage 2. Then in the final stage, they worked their way inside the top 5 and seemed to have a very fast car. Like a year ago, when the track cooled down last year, the 9 car came alive, because at the beginning of the day, when it was in the sun, or really it was in the heat, he wasn't that good. But when the track cooled down, he came to life, and he was making a charge for 3rd place at the very end of that race. I don't really have the video access to it, but I saw it on social media. He about lost it off of turn 4 coming to the white flag and nearly spun himself out. Thankfully, car to the outside, I think that may have been J.J. Yaley, saved the 9 car, and if you don't believe it, just go look at the video of his onboard, and the guy behind him had an onboard of what happened, Eric Almirola, so we do thank the 10 team for having an onboard camera to see what happened. But he came away with a nice 4th place finish, got 9 stage points in total from last night's race, and because of the way where he finished, and because of the stage points he accumulated, he's gained 20 points from where he started the race. He's now 64 below the cutoff. He still needs to win, But a run like that, if he can keep the streak up, he may not need to win to make the playoffs if we don't get any new winners down the road. I think we probably will, and he may be one of them. But a great run for the 9 team last night for a car that was really good the entire race. Down to his teammate Kyle Larson and finished 5th, the winner of the inaugural Cup race at Nashville Superspeedway in 2021. They were struggling at the beginning. They weren't really that good like their other two teammates were. They hovered around the top 15, didn't really seem to have the grip in the car. It's been kind of the case for the 5 team this year. When they don't have good cars at the beginning, they struggle. But when the track cools down, or like when the end of the race matters the most, they seem to hit it right with adjustments and start progressively marching their way towards the front. And at the end of the night, they walk away with a 5th place finish. So a definitely good result for the 5 team, although I would like to see a little more consistency from them. Taking a bad car at the beginning and turning into a top 5 at the end of the night, I think is a job well done. And then finally, William Byron with a 6th place finish. Beginning of the race, he had the best car in the Hendrick stable. And at one point, he was battling for the lead 3 wide with the 2 dominant cars of the race, the entire race, and Ross Chastain and Martin Truex Jr. But it seemed like when the track cooled down, his car, unlike other people, fell away from him. He got loose, but thankfully they were able to tighten up in that final pit stop, and he was able to come away with a solid 6th place finish. It's still been a big, solid year for that 24 team and William Byron. Definitely, you can't say anything about this team other than they've been rock solid, they've been consistent. They can keep this up down the road. They will be one of the teams to talk about when we reach the playoffs. So a really good run for all 3 of those Hendrick drivers, Elliott, Larson, and Byron. Number 4, big hit in the middle of stage 2. And I'm talking about Ryan Blaney. Yikes, that was a nasty, nasty hit. So the caution after Tyler Reddick spun for the loose right rear wheel, it shuffled up the field, and we had a couple cars at the front that had not yet pitted but were able to come down pit road and make their stop when that caution came out, and everyone else that had already pitted took the waiver on to either get their lap back or, stay a lap down. It shuffled up the running order, and when the green flag dropped in the restart, the 6th car, Brad Keselowski, for some reason didn't get going, and maybe he missed a shift on the restart. While that happened, it started an accordion effect on the inside lane, really the entire field, and I'm thankful that we didn't have a massive wreck on the front stretch like it looked like it was going to possibly happen. But Ryan Blaney got bumped in from behind by Kyle Busch. Blaney went around and hit the inside wall hard. And by the way, that wall is not a safer barrier wall. It's a concrete wall. It took Blaney a while to get up out of the car. He came in there and said, "Holy bleep." I think you know what I mean when I say that. That hurt. It was a very hard hit. And you look at the front of the car, I'm like, ooh, that's not good. And thankfully he was able to climb out. He did kind of, I don't know if he fell to the ground or something, or maybe just bent over a little bit to try to collect himself from that big hit, but he was fine after that, and he did say, "I'm okay," but that was a big, nasty hit. And yes, I do have a problem with the wreck that happened right there. You saw those inside walls, folks. Those were not safer barriers, they're concrete walls. Have we learned nothing from Kyle Busch's 2015 Daytona crash? Now, granted, actually I think what he did hit was a safer barrier wall, or maybe it was those guardrail walls that we normally have for the road courses at Watkins Glen, for example. Maybe it was a concrete wall. I mean, I haven't gone back and looked at that video recently, but I know what Kyle Busch dealt with in that big hit that he took in that race. He ultimately broke his leg and didn't return into a car until late May. We cannot have these incidents. I thought, especially after last year, with the adjustments and changes we made after the wrecks that gave Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman concussion-like symptoms, I thought we would have learned by now. Nashville and NASCAR need to look into that inside wall, and they need to apply safer barrier walls at that section. We need safer barriers, because the more safer barriers we have, the less risk we'll have of any driver possibly getting hurt, or, I don't want to be too negative when I say this, killed, but we do not need to have anybody get hurt in the sport, especially with the cars right now. Obviously, we've made adjustments to the front and rear clips inside the cars when it comes to drivers absorbing a hit. But where Ryan Blaney hit last night, even with the front clips that we applied to the car at the beginning of this year, hitting that concrete wall was a nasty hit, and we cannot have that anymore. So Nashville, the next time we come back there in 2024, which is the last year on the deal, but I believe that we may have a future here, we need to put safer barrier walls in that section to run the entire racetrack, because again, I don't think Nashville probably realized that would probably happen, because they came back into the sport in 2021. They need to learn from that mistake, and they need to apply the safer barrier walls. Thankfully, Ryan Blaney was okay, but that hit basically led a lot of people to say it's time to put safer barriers in that inside wall section right there. And number 5, the racing products. So this year, we started the race later than what we have done the previous 2 years. And I think obviously heat was one factor into it, but we saw last year how fun the racing was when we went under the lights. We had some good battles. Well, the entire race yesterday, we started at 6 o'clock Central Time. We actually moved the race up about half an hour because we were trying to beat some incoming weather on the way. We did beat the weather, by the way. We got all 300 laps into the race. The racing we had the entire race from start with the sun kind of going down to the finish when the lights were on. There was some great battles on the racetrack. Great side-by-side action all around the racetrack. I mean, the start of stage 2, we had 3 drivers, Chastain, Truex, and Byron, running 3 wide for the lead for 3 consecutive laps. I'm like, how are these guys holding it together when they're running side by side that close to one another, and how tight and narrow these turns are in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 with not a lot of banking down there, and especially with all the chaos that we saw from Saturday's Xfinity race, I thought for sure we were going to have a big wreck. But those 3 holding it together 3 wide for 3 consecutive laps, that was unbelievable racing. I mean, behind them, they were 3 wide for 4 for 3 laps, for crying out loud. There was good battles out there. There was some tire fall off in the race. We saw guys able to maneuver up the racetrack a little higher groove versus most guys would probably would have preferred to run the bottom if their cars worked down there. But we had some good battles at this race last night. I feel like we do have a good future here at Nashville Superspeedway. I know there are talks about if we can get Nashville Fairgrounds onto the schedule in the near future. We're still trying to work on that. But I believe Nashville Superspeedway, ever since we debuted here in 2021, it has earned its right to be on the Cup schedule for many years to come. I think we need a brand new contract extension with this track after the contract's up at the end of next year. This is a good, fun racetrack. And I feel like maybe starting it a little bit later in the day is a good idea because of the racing product that we got last night with the guys battling 3 wide for the lead. And obviously the drivers in this race were a little more calm and more experienced than the guys from Saturday's Xfinity race. I mean, that Xfinity race, all those opening laps with cautions, with spins and wrecks gave me a headache, man. But I really appreciated the respect and the battles that the drivers put on the racetrack last night. We saw comers and goers for the majority of the race. We saw a couple guys that started up at the front of the field, run up there for a few laps, and then they fell back and never recovered. Then we had guys that didn't qualify that well or had to start at the rear, like Chastain's teammate Daniel Suarez for a qualifying crash. They worked their way up towards the front as the track continued to cool down, gain a little bit of grip, and the cars, I think most of those cars that were coming to late in the race had, speed when it came to the nighttime. Guys like Kevin Harvick, he was coming on strong at the very end of that race until he cut a right rear tire on the front stretch. Thankfully, didn't bring out a caution because it really would have shaken up what was about to become green flag pit stops for the majority of the field. But great racing last night. I like Nashville Superspeedway a lot, and I think we need a new contract extension with this racetrack. It is a fun, fun racetrack. And this weekend was also the first race of the year for NASCAR at NBC. Jeff Burton, Rick Allen, Steve Letarte, and NASCAR Hall of Famer Dale Jr. It's good to have them back at the track live, along with the people in pit road, Marty Snyder, Dave Burns, Kim Kuhn. Parker Kligerman was actually up in Chicago to prep ourselves for next weekend's big event. And, of course, the Peacock Pit Box with old Kyle Petty and NASCAR Hall of Famer Dale Jarrett. It's good to have them back at the track and hearing Junior and Burton, get their perspective of the drivers on the track. Steve Letarte walking through what the crew chiefs were doing during green flag pit stops. We had 3 rounds of them yesterday. And, of course, hearing Rick Allen saying, green flag back in the air. Good to hear them say that again. It's good to have them. They carried us from the green flag of last night's race, and they'll take us all the way to the checkers in Phoenix when we crown a new champion later this year. But it's good to have them back and set up the drama for these next 9 races to find out who's going to make the playoffs and who's going to be left on the outside looking in. And then we'll get the playoffs started in September. But good weekend to have NBC back. And boy, they had to work last night because it was a hot one down there. And now, next weekend, we are off to Chicago. No, we're not going to Chicagoland Speedway, folks. I know what you're probably thinking. Chicago, Joliet. No, we're not going to Chicagoland Speedway. We're going to the city of Chicago, and we're going street course racing for the first time in NASCAR history. We've seen IndyCar and Formula One do street races in previous years, and of course IndyCar still does that to the day with now Detroit and of course the streets of Toronto. But for the first time ever, NASCAR is giving street racing a try. After many years of pondering, wondering, should we do a street course race, we are doing it here in the city of Chicago. And we have 12-turn track. It'll be a very interesting course. We've never done this before. It'll be a big experiment, not just for the fans, but for the drivers as well. And we're also going to do the race radio style. So we'll have Rick Allen and Steve Letarte on the front stretch, and then off into turn number 1 and also connected to the other side of the turn 6, we're going to have the bagman, Mike Bagley from MRN Radio and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio join in on the coverage. We'll have Dale Jr. in turn 4, and then at turn 11, we'll have Jeff Burton take it from there. It'll be a fun, interesting broadcast on Independence Day weekend to see how this racing is going to go. No Cup drivers are allowed to do Xfinity on Saturday because we don't want anybody to gain an unfair advantage. So no AJ Allmendinger in Saturday's race. It'll be Justin Marks instead in the 10 car. And normal Cup drivers in the big race next weekend. Jimmy Johnson's going to win the race. I think we have a V8 driver that's going to do it. A rally car driver that's going to do the street course race. I forget his name. I'm going to have to learn it when I'm looking at the entry list. But it should be a very interesting weekend with a lot of big question marks. Thinking, is this venue that we're about to do, is it going to work? Are we going to have good racing? Are we going to have a calamity-filled race? That remains to be seen. We'll find out when we hit the streets next weekend. Who will be entered as the favorite? Well, we don't technically have a favorite unless if you have road course experience. Can you carry that onto a street course like a Chase Elliott, a Martin Truex, a Tyler Reddick, an AJ Allmendinger, or Michael McDowell, Kyle Busch, any of those guys? We will see. It will be an interesting event, but I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see how it shakes out next weekend. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Subscribe, like, and once again, congrats to Ross Chastain and the one team in Trackhouse winning and their kind of home circuit because they have operations out there in Nashville, even though they're still operating in Charlotte, North Carolina. They also have operations out there in Nashville. So congrats to the one team and Ross Chastain on the win last night. Hope you all have a wonderful week, everybody. Let's go racing!